As political candidates get the official nod from the IEBC and the campaign gates swing open, within political circles, a cloud of uncertainty hangs. A bill to implement the two-thirds gender rule is still gathering dust at the National Assembly. The bill has been shot down several times as it struggled to get the two-thirds majority vote to sail through. The constitutional rule, which was to pave way for gender equality, is now at the center stage of the upcoming election.
But we must accept that we will not be as prosperous as we hope or as fair as we aim to be if half the population is disadvantaged and discriminated against. And that is why I have insisted that my administration must further the cause of gender equality and the empowerment of women in particular.
Oh mama, wadada, wasichana, yani watu wa jinsia watapata haki yao. Ile sheria ya kijinsia itapatia haki yao sawa na wanaume. There will be gender equality in the new Kenya ambayo tutajenga, sawa?
So what happens if the 11th Parliament completely fails to reach a consensus on the two-thirds gender rule? Will the incoming Parliament be affected if it fails to reach the gender threshold? And is this a derailer for Kenyan women seeking equal representation in Parliament? We try to answer these questions on tonight's Roundtable with me, Asha Mwilu. Good evening and welcome to the Roundtable. Tonight we're discussing the two-thirds gender rule. As we know, the 11th Parliament is yet to pass that crucial bill that will allow us to implement that constitutional requirement. My panel tonight, welcome John Gerachu, parliamentary writer with the Daily Nation, Honorable Millie Odhiambo Mbita MP, Flavia Mongovia from Equality Now, and of course Joy, we know you, you're always a political analyst here, Joy Brenda Mdivo, and also a lawyer with the East African Center for Law and Justice. Welcome. Are we likely to face a crisis now that we haven't implemented the gender rule? Honorable, let's start with someone who's on the inside, inside Parliament. Are you a looming crisis?
Depending on how the Chief Justice reacts, it is possible to have a crisis because it was very clear what the decision of the court, and we had up to Monday, which was yesterday, to pass that would ensure that we have or implement the two-thirds gender rule. But as it stands, as of today, the Constitution and in violation of the court ruling. So the Chief Justice is at liberty to
which is, they have to do this, it's mandatory for them to pass the bill, failure to which the people who petitioned are at liberty to move the Chief Justice and ask him to advise the President to dissolve Parliament. So it's not an automatic consequence. The petitioners have to move to the Chief Justice, who in turn has to advise the President, who can take the advice or not take the advice. So there's still some work to be done for the crisis to be triggered, so to speak.
Yeah, but there seems to be a perception within Parliament that in this Parliament, actually, the courts can't dictate because, it has a life of its own and that expires on election day. So even the Speaker himself of the National Assembly has said this, that we are reading the Constitution partially.
I don't think so, really. I think if you are talking about the principle of separation of powers does not mean you are rogue. And I should really be speaking for the Parliament. But I would want to say that separation of powers, it's about checks and balances. when as the executive you go outside your mandate, there's a set of checks and balances, and that means Parliament can already pass, say for instance, a law that stops you from going, excess as executive. And as Parliament, if we go beyond our limit, the judiciary can tell us you are going beyond, or if we don't do our mandate as per the Constitution. So our independence is not absolute. Mm-hmm. If we go outside our mandate, then there's a set of checks and balances, both from the executive and especially the judiciary. And therefore, I wouldn't say that the judiciary is encroaching. It is not encroaching. It's basically like, sorry for wading into the Anne Waiguru thing. Like Anne Waiguru, Parliament passed a report. And I hear people saying that's in vain. Parliament cannot act in vain. Once a parliamentary report is passed, it must be taken seriously, and until and unless you challenge it in court, it becomes valid and IBC can act on it. So Anne did a good thing by going to court to challenge our report.
And that's understandable what you're saying, that the courts can now actually advise Parliament on how to move forward. But the question everyone will be asking is, why haven't we been able to implement this rule? It's already been 5 years. You've covered Parliament, John.
Yeah.
Why do you think this bill is always failing?
I think first, the bill fails because sometimes it's not marketed properly. Like the last time it failed, a lot of the MPs that we were speaking to were making it sound like they were of the impression that once the bill is passed, their political bosses will get an opportunity to nominate their girlfriends to Parliament, kind of thing. It was very misunderstood. In fact, the last time it failed, some MPs were standing with us at the lobby, watching the TV screen and laughing and clapping, because they had voted with their feet. They misunderstand.
Were these mainly male MPs or female MPs?
They were all male MPs.
All male MPs.
All male MPs. But I think a good number of them don't understand the bill when it comes. And when it does, those that understand it do not bother to sell it, to market it well to them.
What has been your concern from where you've been observing this process?
Okay, for me, I think for us not having made any movement up until now, it really speaks to the pulse of society as we know it now today. It's really a reflection of our society, because patriarchy, sexism is really the order of the day. And the drafters of this constitution, I think, were not unwise, because they did know that they were reading the signs of the time. They do know the nature of society that we have. But it's by putting that provision in the constitution that will sometimes accelerate gains or us to arrive at a particular destination. And in this case, we want parity. The 2/3 is really just a starting point, ideally. What we're aiming for is 50-50. So for us to fail to pass the legislation that we needed to pass all this time is really an indicator of the kind of thinking that we have. Because if you're going to refer to women who will be coming into those positions as girlfriends or people who are... No.
Or even flower girls,
yeah,
that's another term that's used.
Political participation and participation in decision-making is a right in and of itself. One, as a woman, I have a right to participate. Only that, due to historical vulnerabilities, injustices, I'm not able to compete on the same footing as my male counterpart, due to obvious reasons. So the idea is to really give us a stepping stone where, once we demystify women's political participation and leadership, the women and girls behind us will be able to just flow on without necessarily fighting so much. And that's why we have the likes of Millie, who have really led the way. And it's for us now to have more Millies. I'm
actually going to play a clip for you shortly that actually shows you the sentiments of some of the male MPs in Parliament. But do you think the women MPs did enough for this bill?
It would be nice to hear from them before I get on the defense.
I want them to actually tell us, what do you think? Do you think they did enough?
Personally, as a Kenyan woman, I would have loved to be more involved, because sometimes it's not really clear to me what's being done. Perhaps there's a lot that is being done, but it's not very clear to me. So I think there's a bit of also disconnected efforts. The conversation perhaps could have been more seamless in terms of what strategies we put in place as women of Kenya to ensure that this passes, because we have
some of us who, like the day, there's one incident where we were literally marching on the streets of Nairobi, like we were like 7 people holding a banner. Remember, it was a day, it was raining, and that's the day there was a vote. Perhaps that's the clip you want to show us. So we were very
Is it
curious.
last year, April?
It was last year, sometime, one of the votes. I have lost track of how many times I've shouted myself hoarse on this subject matter. But for me, in terms of the women parliamentarians, I do believe that the willingness to get us there is perhaps there. But it's not clear to me, as a Kenyan woman, to what extent have I been involved in that process of understanding what it is that is needed from me and what I should expect from
So you felt like they were working like lone rangers, they weren't involving other women from other spheres of society?
Let me just point something out. She mentioned the Constitution. I think that's where the rain started beating us. Because when the Constitution was drafted, you will notice that for the Senate and for the county assemblies, the formula to have these 2/3 has been worked out very clearly, and it was put in legislation. And there's no problem. Even if the election does not produce 2/3, at least 1/3 of the women, then there is a way of making it even. But I think we left out the National Assembly on purpose. In my opinion, all those negotiations in Naivasha up to leading to the final, now we are going with this is what we're going to vote for, a lot was removed, a lot was watered down, a lot was diluted, because in my opinion, we should not be fighting for a law to make this principle a reality. It should have been worked out either in the Constitution or the provisions made so clear, like she said, 50-50. There's no arguing 50-50. Nominate a man, nominate a woman, each go for, and we have parity. But the unwillingness and the cunningness and the selfishness of the people who are negotiating, looking at this in terms of their own interests rather than the interests of Kenya, has gotten us to this point. So such that now women in Kenya have a right on paper, but we have to fight tooth and nail to actualize it in Parliament. It's sad.
Maybe I'd say, let me start from where she stopped. That happened to have been in Naivasha. And I can tell you in Naivasha, there was a lot of give and take. And for those of us who remember, people were waiting for the white smoke. And, the country was tense. And I said it somewhere before, sometimes people don't know what we go through. I remember after we finished Naivasha, many of us were admitted because of stress. Orengo was literally lifted by a chopper from Naivasha straight to hospital. And then we found many of us in hospital after the writing of the Constitution, because there was so much stress because of the pressure on us from the country. Everybody was looking at us, hoping that we give a solution, especially after the post-election violence. And people were agreed on the most contentious issues until we came to the chapter on women. And that's where the first disagreement came between the men and the women. And I remember at one point, Mia was kind of a hardliner on the women's issues. Martha was a hardliner. But then at some point we agreed, and especially from persuasion from Martha and Charity, and they said, Millie, the guys, and we had men who were hardliners on the women's issues. And the hardliners who didn't, they don't care about parties. Babu, Isaac Ruto, William Ruto, they were hardliners, and they were even, who is this from the coast?
So they were against the bill.
They didn't want anything to do with one additional woman in Parliament.
Okay.
But at some point, they agreed that for us to move forward, let's drop the numbers we wanted, and we picked 47. Because originally it was 100 and something, which was the 1/3. Yeah. But then we agreed, and I remember very clearly Martha telling me, Millie, so long as we have 47 and we have it in the pockets, let's live to fight another day for the balance. And that's how we agreed. So there was no, if you ask me, there was no monkey business. There was no really hidden cards. I think if there was anybody who removed the formula, it was removed later, because you remember after that it went back to the committee of experts and whatever. So in between all these levels of negotiations, something was removed.
John is disagreeing there.
Actually, I've reported on this before.
Yes.
And you've reminded me something I was told. I might have been mistold, or I might have misquoted the person who told me. But they were saying that the committee of experts had a nice formula that was then mutilated in Naivasha by the parliamentary committee. Because if you talk to the committee of experts, and I interviewed one of them, and they say our formula was perfect.
Yes.
But then when it went to Naivasha, it was
The
subjected
reason
to
why,
this grind
the
of
reason why I can tell you
give
that
and
their
take.
formula had to change because their formula was originally based on numbers, and they said we will have 120 something. So it means a whole 120 something women would have come in. But when we changed the way that chapter was crafted, we did not then bring the formula that was being used for other areas. And that's why I'm saying, because after the committee of experts, it came to us as the special committee, the select committee. Then from the select committee, it went back to the committee of experts. You cannot rule out mischief, that somebody said, okay, if these women are being difficult, let them think they have it, but we don't really have it. And I suspect that's what happened. Exactly. Now, what I don't know is whether it happened at our committee, because our committee, even if you look at the Hansard, we did not say that we should leave that formula. Because what we were doing is we were agreeing in principle that we have the 47.
Right.
But that the balance should then come through other means.
Yes.
But again, if you actually look at what we had said that we will live to fight another day. Yes. Because for us to actually move forward, because the men were not taking any...
But that day didn't reach. I mean, it was assumed that now, after agreeing
it was assumed that the day was now, this parliament.
Yeah.
Now come this parliament, fast forward to this parliament, and you're saying that you have the men and they didn't understand it. Actually, the men, most of them understood. We spent a lot of time engaging with the men one-on-one, through lunches, through dinners, almost all of them. We had one-on-one with them, and they understood very well. What the men said is they do not want too many, there are too many women. They said we don't want too many women.
So let me actually play this clip for you. I just want you to look at that screen, because I want to play this clip. This is from last year when there was a vote in the National Assembly and that bill flopped.
Assembly apparently defied appeals from President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga to turn up in large numbers and vote for the gender bill. Only 247 MPs out of a total of 349 MPs could be marshaled into the chambers after the quorum bell was rung for 30 minutes, double the time stated in the standing orders. But when it came to voting, only 195 MPs supported it, falling short of the threshold by 38 votes. 28 MPs present rejected the bill. Baringo Central MP Sami Mwaita and Sirisia MP John Waluke explained why they voted against the bill.
There are so many women in this house. But yesterday, they did not turn up in a big number. Why should we vote for them, yet themselves they are not even coming in the chambers to vote?
My decision was informed by the fact that competition should be fair without any of the ground being tilted, that this should favor one gender or the other. And secondly, this is one rule which was one of the 20% in the Constitution, which should have been hammered properly.
Of course, some members, women members of parliament who were not present, some of them were unwell in hospital, others were, the president was visiting some parts of this country, and the first lady also was visiting some other parts of this country, so they had to be away. Only 2 or 3 were out of the country.
Let us also remember that over 100 MPs were not in the House yesterday. And really, we needed less than 50, MPs to make the bill pass.
Interestingly, 5 minutes earlier, a constitutional bill by Homa Bay MP Peter Kaluma that seeks to stop courts from interfering with matters pending before Parliament had been unanimously passed with 2/3 majority. 242 MPs supported it, only 5 rejected.
My bill was being patched together with the 2/3 gender, rule bill, the women empowerment bill, to enable as many MPs to be there as possible. My bill was a bait.
Short text messages sent to the majority of male lawmakers poisoned the mood after they were considered threatening. A sample of the text sent through SMS code 20465 read, quote, "Dear Honorable MP, please note that voting for the constitutional bills is public. We will be watching and counting on you to vote for the bill." End of quote.
I got some text from FIDA, from KNHCR, doing a lot of lobbying, which is way beyond the normal lobbying. And you know what the FIDA has been doing in this country? FIDA, we need to start FIDA for men also. You know, the way FIDA have been hammering men all over the place. We thought there's something behind which we are not being told.
When I was sent a text message by FIDA and human rights, I think it provoked me, and I said, I'll not be intimidated and I'm not going to vote yes. I voted nay.
Some lawmakers we spoke to said they rejected the bill to assist the government effort in controlling the ballooning wage bill. Other reasons cited was lack of clarity on how the special seats would be filled. The process has been abused by those in political party leadership, where majority of the nominees have been selected to parliament based on nepotism, cronyism, or other unorthodox means. Last week, Thursday, women MPs lost bid to have a special election kitty to fund their campaigns.
If we were to give a special fund to the women who are aspiring for seats and they go out there and campaign, then it means more of them are going to be elected in even the constituency seats and in the county assemblies. What that means, therefore, we don't need to nominate so many, which eats into the taxpayers' account.
Some were not persuaded because the bill did not specify how we would get these additional gender numbers. But those are matters for legislation, and those are matters we can negotiate later in the Elections Act.
We have here quite a number of members of parliament who fought with the men, and they are here, and quite a number of them. And some of these many leaders in the past have made it. The Ngulis of this world have made it. Why don't they make it now? Why should we make it so soft? Simply saying it's because of the gender.
Speaker Justin Muturi invoked his powers and gave MPs a full week to lobby and make a second attempt Thursday next week. If the bill is lost next Thursday, it will have to wait for 6 months before being reintroduced. Patrick Amimo, KTN News.
That was April last year. Isn't it interesting that the Kaluma bill sailed through, and then 10 minutes later when the gender rule bill was being discussed, there was no quorum? I mean, is that what the kind of intrigues that used to happen?
Yeah. That's the kind of intrigues. Actually, you find that the male members, they were not being fairly honest. Like you find when we sit with them, when we lobby them, when we discuss with them, they'll be like they're going to support you. On the floor of the House, when the bill came for second reading, spoke very positively. But then they deny you the quorum, pretty much like what is going on now with the Yala situation, that people don't want to pass it. So when the moment comes, just before that we passed the finance bill, and because of Sport Pesa, there was so much lobbying the House, even though people are campaigning. But the House was really, we had more than quorum. Yeah. But 2 minutes later, there is no quorum. So that's really telling for Parliament when they don't want.
And the is also that how civil society played a role in, flopping this bill. What happened? We're hearing MPs saying that, they got intimidated because there was too much lobbying from women groups, female groups like FIDA. Do you think that was a mistake?
Honestly, I think it's unfortunate. That is truly, I think, a smokescreen. People have their own advocacy strategies. We are all interested parties, and we may all deploy different strategies. But the fact that we even have to come around and advocate and lobby for the implementation of a provision of a constitution, I think is really unfortunate. So we may have had misdoings here and there in terms of the strategy that we deploy, but don't the members of Parliament know what they need to do? Don't they know what is expected of them regarding this provision? So I think it's quite fortunate that we actually bank it at that point. I'm not saying that people did not use, that anyone's strategy was perfect, but I think it's really a smokescreen, and we really need to say why it is that we feel that women and men cannot just have an equal footing in leadership. And on that point, can I kindly bring to our attention that this conversation is not purely on elective politics, it's on elective positions, it's also on appointive. And that's why for me it's really an issue of political will. This came yesterday in the newspaper. I'm sure we all saw it. This came yesterday, yes, this thing. So this is an issue of the 2/3 gender principle, in my opinion.
So what is that exactly?
So basically we have the Ministry of Health putting out an advertiser's announcement in the newspaper. Many women that I know I have interacted with have not read this thing. It could have all our best interests at heart, but we have not read it. Why? Because we cannot have an entire ministry, the cabinet secretary, the principal secretary, the director of medical services, the director of public health as men. Health does not include just health for men. It also includes sexual and reproductive health and rights.
It's interesting that you're bringing that point
Yes.
up, because even as you heard what the MPs were saying, they want women to earn these positions. Why do you want to be...
So how do we earn a cabinet secretary? How do we earn principal secretary?
You know what she's not saying?
Yeah.
She's using very nice terminology. This is government to release a national menstrual hygiene management policy and strategy. So let's say these guys are sitting at a round table the way we are sitting, discussing a policy on menstrual hygiene. They want to tell us what do they know about menstrual hygiene other than your daughter telling you that
experience in menstrual issues. That's why they're right.
I mean, I would have actually loved to see women representatives, the woman representatives, talking about such an issue.
And not even that. My point is this.
My
point is this: if the appointments were balanced and respected that principle from the onset, then this advertiser's announcement will not be looking awkward as it is currently.
Right.
Because now they find themselves flat-footed, because you cannot go plant a cabinet secretary who's a woman for the purposes of a media advertisement. It is a man.
All right.
So this is a ministry position. So that's what I'm saying. We need to have thought through. And it's not just elective, but appointive.
I understand that. Let's just take a short commercial break. When we come back, I really want us to get back to the bill and discuss how it's going to affect the next parliament, if it will. So stay tuned to the round table. We'll be back in a bit.